programming to me is just thinking. Like a lot of my time, I think if people get the idea of like, if you're a software engineer, you just spend all day writing code. I would say now majority, like I do write a lot of code. However, I use AI tools such as GitHub Copilot to write a lot of the boilerplate.
Welcome back to the freeCodeCamp podcast. I'm Quincy Larson, teacher and founder of freeCodeCamp.org. Each week, we're bringing you insight from developers, founders, and ambitious people getting into tech. This week, we're joined by Daniel Bourke. Daniel is a machine learning engineer. He's the creator of many popular tutorials on YouTube, and he's a frequent contributor to the freeCodeCamp YouTube channel. Daniel, welcome to the podcast.
Hey Quincy, it's great to be here. I actually started to learn to code back in the day. I think it was about 2017 on freeCodeCamp. I remember going through all the projects, and so yeah, it's really cool to be here.
Absolutely, man. It's great to have you here, and I just want to emphasize that it's an honor to count among our alumni somebody like yourself who not only goes out and practices like kind of leading edge machine learning techniques, but also turns around and teaches other people how to do that. That's super chill. And I also want to acknowledge that a couple years ago, you had a pretty good year on YouTube, and you turned around and you donated the proceeds from your YouTube channel to freeCodeCamp, to our charity. And that was super kind of you, and that helped, that went toward teacher compensation, that went toward keeping the 100 servers we have around the world up and running. And so I just want to publicly thank you for doing that.
It was my pleasure. I've gained a lot from freeCodeCamp, so yeah, it was very, very heartwarming for me to be able to give back in some way.
Yeah. Well, let's dive in and learn more about you, man. Like, I have really enjoyed watching your videos over the past few years. And to be completely candid, I still don't know that much about your personal life. I know how like ironclad your work ethic is, and how you have all these different techniques to be incredibly productive, which you delve into on your channel. But you're based over there in Brisbane, in Australia. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. Brisbane? How do you pronounce it?
Brisbane. So like
Brisbane. Okay.
So it's almost like there's no E on the end, like Brisbane. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
Bane is, it kind of looks like Bane.
Yeah.
Brisbane.
Well, it's like I always would pronounce Melbourne, and when I went to Melbourne, people were like, "Oh, it's Melbourne." Like it's very
Australia. We like to compress the vowels as much as possible.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I mean, Americans, we do the same thing, right? Like, we have like these like words, like these French words that we inherited, and we just chop them down to like it'll be like 7 letters, and it'll be like one syllable, right? So, yeah. Well, let's talk about your childhood out there, because it sounds like you had a pretty idyllic childhood. I understand that you live pretty close to where you grew up.
I do, yeah. So my family home is about 1 kilometre down the road. The house I live in now, I live in with my second brother. I have 3 younger brothers, so there's 4 boys in our family. And my other 2 brothers live 1 kilometre down the street with both my parents. And we really love the area. So back a few years ago, I was thinking about moving to the US, but then that just didn't happen because I found a job in Australia. And I'm like, you know what? The internet's good enough. I'm just going to stay here because, I love it. We live really close to the Sandgate foreshore or waterfront, which if you look on Google Maps is just a beautiful area. The 3 biggest sand islands are actually just off the east coast of Australia. So we live opposite 3 biggest sand islands in the world, that is. We live opposite Moreton Island, which is the 3rd biggest sand island. It's a beautiful place. We go there for family holidays every year. So I turned 30 last year.
What is a sand island? Is it like a sandbar? Like literally just sand? There's no
So imagine just
dirt?
a huge sandbar, yeah. So it's like just pure sand. Yeah, I mean there is some dirt, but it's like majority sand. So if you like dig underneath the grass and whatnot, that's sort of made its way there over time through wind and water. You'll just start digging into sand. But yeah, it's a huge sandbar. Like we're talking, I think one side of the island is like 25 kilometers long, so maybe 16 miles or whatever I'm not sure the conversion there, but it's it's a great place. And yeah, we go there that's been our family holiday since we were kids, and it's about an hour boat ride offshore, and you can take your full drive there and drive around all the sand tracks and go fishing, and the water's nice and protected and calm, so it's almost like a big harbour/lake. So it's not where I go for walks in the afternoon and evenings is really calm. It's not like it's a beach, but it's not like a wavy
walking
beach.
on like an ocean beach, but there's not like a bunch of waves.
Exactly, yeah. So it's more like a big like lagoon/lake.
Yeah.
That's how I would describe it.
That's really cool.
You're
like
not
how
going.
often?
You're not going surfing there.
How often? Yeah, maybe like kiddie surfing, like getting your kids ready for like seeing if they can stand on the board. Yeah, like how often do you actually go out to the beach and go for walks?
Almost every day. Like I was out there yesterday. I went for a walk with my two young brothers and dogs, and we were walking for I think an hour and a half or so. But it's a beautiful. I try to get out to see the water almost every day, and we call it the scenic route when you drive home. Is like driving home. We take the long way instead of like going straight to the house. We drive along the boulevard and just look out at the big expanse of water.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Australia has a lot of big cities, of course, like Melbourne and Sydney and Brisbane. Is that like a major tech hub, or is it like what is the population? What is the industry like there?
Well, I would say definitely Sydney is the tech hub, or like just the business hub in general, and then Melbourne probably follows that as a close second, and then Brisbane's probably third after that. So if I wanted to be really into it and definitely get a job in the industry, I'd probably move to Sydney or Melbourne. To work at a place, but because of the internet these days, like Brisbane's not that far behind. And I've been to Sydney. To me, that's like the New York of Australia. It's too hectic for me. I quite like to just chill out and not sit in traffic for hours at a time. And Melbourne is beautiful, like just a beautiful conglomerate of different cultures. There's almost mini cities within a city in Melbourne. That's how I perceive it. And then Brisbane is kind of almost like, I'm biased obviously, but Brisbane's like the best of both worlds of Sydney and Melbourne. So it's got that just enough busy but not too crazy, but it's also it's really starting to now pop off with different little pockets of culture and restaurants and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. I mean, that's like kind of the city like I like to live in. Like I like to live in a city, but New York City, Los Angeles, like a little bit too big, and being in somewhere like a little smaller, and I've seen like videos of you just going out and ride bikes or like those like really short bikes. What were those, like tricycle things? I don't know what it is.
Oh yeah,
it's a big wheel. We call it a big wheel. Yeah. Talk about
drift
those.
trikes. Oh, so they're epic. They're like so little tricycles. You're sitting probably 2 to 3 inches off the ground. In a bucket seat, you got one big wheel on the front, and then you have 2 rubber tires on the back, and you make them into drift trikes by putting PVC pipe over the tires. So there's basically on the bitumen there's no grip, so you can move, but then as soon as you try to turn, your whole back end slides out. And because my family home is on a pretty steep hill and pretty long, like it's a few hundred meters long. We built these drift trikes, and then we'd ride down the side street to get speed, turn left onto the hill, and then you could just skid out down the whole bottom of the hill. You'd have someone down there looking out for when there's cars. They give the all clear, and then you just shoot down, walk back up the hill, start again.
So it's like Initial D for kids, almost.
Huh? Yeah.
Initial D. You're familiar with the anime, the drift racing kid?
No, I have. Oh wait, is that the one with the That's it. Where the 86 is that the Toyota 86? Yeah. Okay, I know it from the car because my friends are really into cars, and they love their Toyota 86, and so I've heard of it from there.
I went back and rewatched the first season. It's pretty exciting. Like, it's cool. It still holds up. But yeah, like whenever I play like Mario Kart or something, that's the thing I like to power slide, right? And so the notion that you could actually physically do that. How dangerous? Like, do you ever tip over?
Yeah. Like you'll hit the like you got videos of us like you hit the gutter and you kind of because your front wheel's so big you hit the gutter and then it goes you like tip over the front because your front wheel doesn't mount the gutter, it just gets stuck. Like basically, luckily there was no touch wood hectic accidents, so minor crashes, skin knees, that sort of stuff, but. Nothing too outlandish.
Yeah, but that sounds like so fun. It's just like a nice physical activity. Go out and enjoy the outdoors. It sounds like you're quite the outdoorsman and that you've optimized for spending a lot of time outdoors through your lifestyle.
100%. Yeah, I like. I kind of love the balance between being sort of a monk in the mountains and just exploring and doing nothing most of the time, and then being like a tech nerd and in front of screens all day and concentrating and building things and making stuff. So it's I wouldn't say it's 50-50, but it's sometimes the one side builds up too much and then I'm like, okay, I'm sick of relaxing and being in the mountains. I need to go do some computer stuff. And then vice versa. It's like, okay, I'm sick of being in front of a computer. I need to get outside.
Yeah, and you can just toggle between the two like really easily. You've got the beach there, you've got that hill that you can, drift race down.
Well, no, you're so right. Like it's not far. It's about the where I live is probably a 10-minute walk to the beachfront, and so or bike ride. Like I go for one of the two almost every day. So it's a very it's a very cool place. Yeah.
Well, I'm excited to learn a little bit about they say that like people up in really cold, brutal climates like Russia or Scandinavia, they become like the best chess masters because they're forced to, they have the best authors because they're like forced to stay in all the time and they can't go out and have fun in the sun and yet you're in a very it sounds like a great place to just relax and enjoy the outdoors, and yet you are also very productive staying inside working on your laptop a lot. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that, like how growing up, what got you interested in technology when you've got like this great big outdoors, like Australia, famous for being like very sparsely populated, having this huge kind of outback area that takes up most of the continent. Why didn't you end up like Steve Irwin, for example? Why are you more like Jan LeCun or somebody like that, right?
Yeah, maybe I'm a crossover between Steve Irwin and Jan LeCun. I kind of got similar hair to Steve Irwin. That's a fantastic question. I basically got into computers as early as I can remember. I mean, my parents, I remember them being at my grandparents' house, basically talking about the fact that my mum was talking with my grandparents that she was going to buy a computer, and I was just so interested. I didn't actually know what it was, and then this is maybe when I was 5, 6, or 7. And then she bought a computer for her business or our family business, that is. And it was one of those old school ones, like big grey plastic box, like monitor was probably, if we looked at the size of that monitor these days, it would be like, people really looked at these for hours on end. Yeah. Whereas now we're kind of blessed with 30-inch high definition screens. But I was just fascinated with it, and then you just sort of you get into that habit of just as a kid just playing around, clicking things, going through. I remember going through because this is I think almost pre-internet, or the internet was like dial-up, and so it kind of sucked. And then, but I remember just clicking through the menus, just being like, I can move this thing on the desk, and it like relates to the screen. I'm actually still fascinated by that. Because I haven't delved into like how computer hardware works at a really deep level. It still fascinates me that there's analog parts in computers, and like you press a key and it somehow triggers a current, and then the letter Q appears on your screen. Anyway, got into that, naturally started to find the internet, naturally started to find online games, and it just went from there. My dad started to get, he was a teacher at the high school I went to, and then laptops started to get introduced, but he never learned to use a computer. He never learned to use a smartphone. And that's also like really fascinating to me, is thinking about, because now like my life is basically computers and screens, but he's lived his whole life without computers and screens. So it's like really like fascinating to me, like that juxtaposition. And I feel like that's kind of influenced me a lot into not just being 100% involved in screen time.
Yeah.
But he got a laptop and basically, never really learned to use it. So my brothers would like hijack it because he'd bring it home from school, and we'd get this laptop. And because it was much newer than our computer, I remember when we got Wi-Fi at home, that was like early days of Wi-Fi. And I'm pretty sure, I may be wrong here, I'm fairly sure the technology for Wi-Fi was invented in Australia. May be wrong there. But when my friends would come over, they were like, what the hell? You have Wi-Fi in your house? Because it was like this thing that you would only get at school. And so we'd hack, well, not hack, but I would get my dad's laptop, download a bunch of things. Back in the day was LimeWire, MSN Messenger, and then within probably a month, the computer would just be toast because it's just full of malware and that sort of stuff.
Would you like format it and like just try again?
Well, that's the thing. Like it would just like we would never reset it. It would just go to the IT department, and we don't know if it was like getting reset or if they just gave him a new one or whatnot. But he legitimately hardly
they
ever
must
used
have hated
it
him.
himself.
Every month he brings in like his malware-laden computer that he doesn't even use.
Exactly,
so like
right?
the IT people are like doing labor for his crazy kids, just surfing the web, being reckless, right? That's funny.
And then we kind of got a bit, I guess you could say, entrepreneurial or nefarious. I guess it's been enough time you can tell these stories now. Is that my dad had the teacher's login, right? And so the teacher's login had access to all the student hard drives. And so my friend and I in high school, we actually had a little side business, like hacking into the smart kids and like selling their assignments to people who... which in retrospect, I don't condone this, but it's like, that's basically, I wanted more time to play video games. So I didn't have a job. I would just like, we ran a business, hacking into other students' assignments.
Wow.
Which
that's pretty good. It's like Chegg before Chegg, right?
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah, like homework assignments, but it was local to the school. So yeah.
And then,
I mean,
exactly.
that's industrious, and I'm not going to travel back in time and condemn your kid, even though obviously FreeCodeCamp, we have very high standards for academic honesty, and I am not going to condone any such thing. But
No.
I will say that, like, I mean, that is something you can do. Like, I used to print out Mortal Kombat moves lists, like back in the arcade. Like, nobody knew the moves. You had to like learn the moves through trial and error. Like, oh, forward down, forward, high punch. We'll do the Sub-Zero, spine thing. But like people didn't know that, so I like collected all that stuff, and I formatted this nice sheet, and I would like take it to the arcades, and I'd be like, "Hey, you want all the moves from Mortal Kombat?" They'd be like, "Sure." I'd be like, "All right, $5," and like just sell it, and like money just materializing out of nowhere, right? So similarly, kind of like that early hustle.
Well, yes, exactly. I would much more recommend that route of actually creating materials in academic honesty. But this is almost like I think I was like 14 or 15. So I'm like, well, the file's already there. Like we hadn't really been bombarded with like the importance of academic integrity just yet. And I'm just like, well, I have all these people who are like, no one was doing their assignments because I knew they weren't because we were all playing video games together. And then I was like, anyway, so basically into computers like the whole time. And then, outdoors was just because I feel like it's in Australia, it's like, it's there. So you're just, into it. Like we would go to the beach, like for family holidays. Like so Brisbane, north is the Sunshine Coast, about an hour drive, 45 minutes. And that's a whole bunch of beautiful beaches. And then an hour south is the Gold Coast, which I'm sure many people around the world have heard of. And that's, again, just a collection of some of the best beaches in the world. So it's whereas like other cities like Perth, there's a beach at the city. So like you could have skyscrapers, but then 10 minutes down the street, it's like ocean. And then of course Sydney, there's Bondi Beach, all that sort of stuff. So it's like, it's very, ingrained in Australian culture to be beachy and outdoors. But, and because most of the population is, I think it's within 25 kilometers of a coastline, like 95% plus of the population is within 25 kilometers of a coastline. So it's kind of just ingrained in us to go to the beach or to be outdoors. And I feel like we're kind of a couple of years behind in terms of technology. Well, that's what I noticed as a kid. Was like you'd see the new stuff get released in like the US or UK, and it would trickle down to Australia in like 2 to 3 years. I think the gap as like slightly closed because of just globalization and whatnot. But especially when I was hacking around on my dad's laptop, I'd see all these new releases and be like, oh, I got to wait like 2 to 3 years. I remember buying like my first Xbox accessory on the internet and like having to convince my mum that it was safe. And it took 6 weeks to arrive. And then it was like, it broke after 2 or 3 days. And then it took 8 weeks to send back and get another one. And like that.
I mean, geographically, you're very far from,
I know.
You're a lot closer to Asia than you are to North America.
That's what I mean, right? So
a lot of things arrive late in Australia, but not Wi-Fi. It was indeed invented by the Australian Science Bureau, or I can't.
Wow.
I can't remember
Okay. Yeah.
It's called CSIRO, the National Science Agency.
Yes.
So
that's it.
Like
yeah.
as a tax-paying American, one of the I guess many developments that have come out of like the U.S. government is GPS, right? Like, so all those GPS satellites, that was technically like U.S. taxpayers that like subsidized the development for that, and now everyone in the world gets to benefit from having like Apple Maps or Google Maps or various tools that they can embed into their website or GIS systems, things like that. And I want to thank the people of Australia for subsidizing development of Wi-Fi, because I use it every day.
Exactly. Same here. It's kind of, ubiquitous now,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, those waves are passing through you as we speak. They're everywhere.
Yeah, well, maybe in 100 years' time, we'll kind of go, oh, maybe it wasn't a good idea to pass electromagnetic waves through the entire world.
Yeah.
But
it's not ionizing. I don't think it's too big a deal. We'll see. I could be wrong. Touch wood, as they say in Australia, or knock on wood, as they say here in the U.S. So I am really stoked to. So it sounds like you had a great childhood. Being outdoorsy, being a slacker. There's this saying about programmers that like the best programmers are lazy because they'll figure out like inventive ways to not have to do work.
Yes,
and it sounds
exactly.
like you're like at least like as a child you were someone lazy. Is that a mischaracterization? Yeah,
well,
but
I was lazy towards the things that I was told to do, in a sense. Like, so school, like I was kind of naturally curious in terms of, I remember when I was like 10, I just would I read this atlas, like back to front, like this 1,100 page atlas. And so I got an A in geography without really trying, but I was just fascinated by this atlas. And so that trend kind of continued through high school. Xbox came out and I just would play Call of Duty, and we ran the number one. This is back before e-gaming was like a thing. Esports, sorry. We had this online forum, and we was like 6 of us at high school. We had this team, and our team was the number one in Australia. So I would get home from school from like 3:30 because I lived so close, and we'd just plan strategies for Call of Duty until like midnight, and then I'd go to sleep and wake up at 10 to 8 to be at school by 8:15. So that was basically my senior years at high school. But it was, I would like just, I don't know, get passing grades through high school, not really excelling, but we really did excel at Call of Duty. because it was just fascinating to us.
You could put that as an extracurricular on your college application, I guess. Like,
Exactly,
one Call of
right?
Duty team in Australia.
Maybe
the
now you could,
counselor
but-
would like recognize the value in that. Did you end up going to school, like university, or what did you do?
I did. Straight out of high school, I went to university, the University of Queensland, which is a beautiful university, one of the best in Australia. And it's for the first 2 years, I was kind of just floundering around, and because it was just the thing that you did, right? I didn't really know what I wanted to do out of high school because, as I said, I was just into Call of Duty, or into computer games. But back then, 2010, that was not viable, like to keep going down that path.
Yeah.
Like video games.
I mean, it's still not really viable. Like the biggest
Exactly.
like esports, like my understanding is they got a lot of investment, but they haven't been able to recoup that, and a lot of them are not very solvent right now.
Well, that's what I mean, right? Like, it's like, yeah, it was. If it's a fake business now, it was even more of a fake business. Like in 2010 when I graduated high school, but then I went to university kind of just. I was like, I wanted to be a doctor for I guess more so for the prestige of saying I'm a doctor rather
I'm a doctor.
than that was fundamentally
It's a powerful
exactly,
thing to
right?
be able to say at a dinner party or on a plane when somebody's having cardiac arrest. I'm a doctor. Everybody farts, and you can walk right over and you can help the person, right?
Exactly.
I can definitely see the appeal.
Yeah, so that was the main reason, was more so for the status rather than for the like actual will to or interest in studying human systems and helping people. And so I basically failed almost every subject for the first 2 years of university before I got called in by the Dean of Science, and to his credit was basically like, hey, is everything okay? Like, your grades are terrible, and should you really be at university if you're getting grades?
Yeah.
And I kind of offered the excuse that my dad was sick, and like he was and still is, but it was really just because I was like, well, I'm lazy and I'm not really interested in what I'm studying. And so on the side of, that was the real reason. The good reason was, oh yeah, my dad was sick, please don't kick me out of university.
Yeah.
But on the side, while I was doing biomedicine and that sort of stuff, I was studying food science and nutrition on my own because I was getting into the gym, and I'm like, I want to be fit, I want to be healthy, I want to lift weights, I want to build muscle. And so I was watching YouTube till 11 p.m. at night of people talking about how to work out, bodybuilding, nutrition, that sort of stuff. And so I was telling him he's like, what are you interested in? I'm like, well, I've been learning about this. And he's like, why don't you just change to food science and nutrition? And I was like, like a light bulb clicked. I was like, yeah, you're right. I can just change to what I'm interested in. I kind of didn't, I don't know, it sounds like such a simple realization, but because I was so sort of stuck in that floundering mindset of like, I don't really want to study this, I'm failing, this sucks, I don't really know, I'm kind of lost basically. That was just such a simple light bulb, and I'm still really thankful to, his name is Peter, or it might have been Pod, I think Pod's his nickname, but Peter said, he's like, why don't you just study what you're interested in, you're already learning about it. And I'm like, wow. Such a simple realization. And then I changed to food science and nutrition the next semester, and basically got top of the class for the next 3 years, because I'd already, many of the things in the first 2 years I'd already like learned on my own. And so that was
I imagine
kind of like the
pre-med was probably what you were studying. Did they have an equivalent
Correct,
of pre-med? Yeah.
And so I didn't even
you
do
probably already knew a
biology.
lot about like biology, right? Like all the different,
Well,
metabolism systems and stuff like that.
Sort of. I didn't even do biology in high school. When I say I was really just like, oh, this girl that I like is also doing biomedicine. I want to do biomedicine because I like this girl, and I also like the idea of one day telling people I'm a doctor. But that was 17-year-old me, and I guess with time you become a little wiser, hopefully. So that's what happened, and then studied that, and then passed with, or actually didn't just pass, like almost top of the class the whole way through, and then graduated with that. And I basically, that was the more important lesson, was learning how to learn. Like I realized that I was like, oh, if I'm interested in something and I just dedicate myself in a semi-structured / experimental fashion, I can learn whatever I want, basically. Like that's how it felt. That it felt like a superpower. It was like, oh, I'm just going to have to devote myself wholeheartedly to something that I'm fascinated and interested in.
Yeah.
And so subsequently, coding, programming is just basically exactly the same thing.
Yeah, recurring character stepping onto the stage of the FreeCodeCamp podcast each week, learning how to learn.
Exactly.
And of course, obligatory mention of Barbara Oakley's Learn How to Learn course, which, Leon, Noel has mentioned. I think Ben Awad mentioned it. Like, a lot of different people who've been on the podcast have talked about the learning how to learn and just what it unlocks for you. Like, I'll go on a
Totally
little soliloquy here. Developers, the number one job description is not sitting there and turning coffee into code or whatever it says on the cup, but rather learning. That is the killer app. That is really what you're paid to do, is learn what this legacy code base is, how it works, and then going in and learning, what you need to do to accomplish whatever goal has been put in front of you by your boss or by the open source community or whoever you're beholden to get things done, right? So, learn how to learn. All right, that concludes the little ad read for learn how to learn as a mentality, and yeah. So you were able to finish school. You walked away with not just a degree from a good school, but also probably a lot of knowledge about health and nutrition, but also just like this skill to learn new things. What do you do from there?
Yeah. I would say the learning how to learn was that's the meta skill, right? You can apply that to anything. So that was 2015. I graduated, and then I studied Eastern languages for a year because I was working at Apple as a genius, quote unquote. That was my actual title.
Genius bar. Like you'd help people when their hardware wouldn't turn on or something like that. What was the most common thing that people would ask for help with?
Broken screens or battery life of iPhones.
Okay.
And then of course backups. So it's kind of been ingrained into me to be how would you say, kind of obsessed with backing things up. So the amount of times I would have to have a very difficult conversation with someone to basically say everything on your laptop is gone because you didn't have a backup and you spilled coffee all over it and now it won't turn on, and that we basically couldn't help you. You may be able to go to like a data recovery center, but again, that there's no promises there because it's all liquid damage. So there were very tough conversations to have, and so I've got like half a dozen backups of almost everything everywhere.
Okay, so off the cuff, what is a good backup strategy? I talked to like the CTO of my company. He had a hard drive, like a local hard drive that he had like Time Machine on. Time Machine being the Apple backup thing. I'm not sure if it's still called Time Machine, but he had Time Machine, and every day when he showed up with his laptop, he'd plug into that external hard drive at work, and then he had one at home, and he plugged into that. And his reasoning is, it's unlikely that both of these hard drives are gonna fail concurrently, or that there's gonna be a fire that breaks out both at my home and my office concurrently. So as long as I have one backup, I'm good. But like, would that level of redundancy be enough for you, or do you go even more hardcore than that?
I would say that would be like the minimum for me is, so I've got my personal setup is just, I've got the external hard drive, I've got two of those actually. I have iCloud on my personal Mac, and then I have Dropbox, and then I have, because again, these are just ease of use, and I think as a developer I could probably set up my own cloud bucket these days, but just the ease of use of these software companies are basically dedicated towards backups. And then finally Backblaze, so they do basically just a complete encapsulation of your hard drive and put that on their cloud storage. So there's about 5 different versions of my local MacBook Pro, but then I have my server upstairs, my deep learning PC. And so right now that's a bit more rudimentary. I kind of just rsync, because it's a Linux machine, I just rsync
rsync.
that every week or so with an external hard drive, and then because I basically just use it to write code. That's all just git committed. And then so if that computer, again, touch wood, was to just completely fail, I could get a new one tomorrow, plug in the hard drive, rsync it across. It would take a bit of setup, of course, and then git clone the repos that I've been working on, and then be off to the markets.
Yeah. Awesome. So, that's got to be a very difficult conversation to have with a total stranger who just walked in. I always think if you ever played Friday the 13th on NES, when you lose, it doesn't just say game over. It says, you and all your friends are dead. Game over. It's almost like that kind of thing. The text appears, every file that you loved is gone forever.
It wasn't, thankfully it was fairly rare, but it was often enough to be burned into my brain. But yeah, that job was actually really cool, because it was I could work on technology all day, just be fascinated by that because I'm a nerd, and I would just talk to people all day. So that's it built up my people skills and communication skills, because I would have to explain a hardware repair or a file system structure in a way that a grandmother could understand, because all your customers would be from different walks of life. Some of them wouldn't be able to speak English as well as I could, because we were in the city, our store. So we would get tourists, we would get elderly people, we would get university students. And so I think over my 3 or so years there working part-time, I served 5,000 customers. And so it's just that repetition of explaining something in something that someone could understand. And that kind of really helped me going into programming, and then subsequently teaching myself that, because I would write notes and code and then explain it to myself in a simple way that I understood. And then later on, a few years later, would be okay, I've kind of built up this latent skill of talking to people, talking to anyone, because I drove Uber for a year as well. And so that's kind of another where you get in and you're just meeting a new person every 10 minutes, and it's okay, some people don't want to talk, that's fair. I'm quite the, animated, talkative person, just generally. I think I get that from being the oldest brother. You kind of got to be almost the leader of the pack, and that kind of gave me that latent skill of just being able to have a conversation with anyone about almost anything. So I'd be comfortable in walking into any room and starting a conversation with someone from zero. And then in a technical aspect, I would also be quite comfortable if there was something I knew, explaining or figuring out where they were in terms of the knowledge stack, whether it be zero or whether it be, okay, we can just talk as if we were both completely on the same level. So I don't really have to explain everything in depth, if you know what I mean. Yeah. And so that was really valuable. I didn't quite realize how valuable that was at the time. It was just oh, this is a cool job. I'm working for Apple. It's the biggest technology company in the world. It's not necessarily on the building the machines or the software. That's what I wanted to get into.
Right.
But it was, that skill that you sort of, just like at university, it was that meta skill that I didn't quite realize until after the fact that was so important. It's it's very easy to go, oh yeah, you learned food science and nutrition. And that's the important thing you learn from there. And it's well, to me, I look back and I was studying that for fun. Yes, it is very helpful to know about health and nutrition and fitness and whatnot. But it's also a really good meta skill to have, is being able to learn something that you're interested in. And then another meta skill of being able to talk to almost anyone about anything. And that's only just in retrospect that I'd sort of noticed that. And so, after I left university, Apple had a program that would if you want, because there were so many international customers, if you wanted to do like a language course, they would subsidize the language course. And so I studied Japanese and Chinese for a year at the same university that I went to, because I was just really interested in Eastern languages and Eastern culture. And we had a few Chinese and Japanese speaking people that worked with us, so I could practice there. And then when customers would come in, I could talk to them. Like, one of my favorite things to say was, like, if it was a Chinese speaking customer, I would be like, 你有没有备份? And they would just like instantly recognize what I would say, which is, do you have a backup or not? Because like just saying, do you have a backup? If someone hadn't really been studying English for a number of years, that
that's
the
like
concept of backup
kind of an
is
idiomatic expression. What does that mean?
Exactly right. They're like, what does that mean? And then I'd say, 你有没有备份? And they'd be like, oh. And it's like, 没有, like as in, okay, no backup. It's like, okay, well then we need to focus on that first.
Yeah. Yeah, and in Japanese, do they have like a word for that, or they just say backup?
I didn't quite think like the terms. I didn't get to use it as much in Japanese. I don't know it if they have a specific term, because I'm
not sure what. Yeah, they just say backup.
A larger customer base was Chinese speaking.
Yeah, but
they might say backup. Yeah, you're right. I think that might be correct.
And like Bay Fun is kind of like piece of equipment, like equipment. Yeah, because Bay is like show Bay to Bay, like gear almost. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not gonna like try to pick apart the etymology on like. There may be some people in the audience who do. Yeah. I spent 20 years like learning Chinese, and I'm getting back into Japanese. Cool. I'm gonna go to Japan for summer, so I've been like hardcore tooling up on my Japanese usage and vocabulary and stuff, but yeah. And if you hear my kids in the background, they're very excited to be home after a long day of school. So that's super chill that you were able to like learn. One thing that a lot of people may not understand is like the Australian economy and is like almost like closer and more interlinked with like Japan and China and countries over in Asia than it is with like North America and Europe. I mean, would you say that's accurate just because of the location, the time zones?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, we definitely have. I'm not quite really well versed on political relations between other countries, but yeah, we definitely do a lot of trade with China. I think a lot of our and Japan actually. My brother is an accountant who audits large companies in Australia, and there was this one meat company. So we have a lot of outback and land, so farms to raise cattle and whatnot. And my brother was working on their case, and he said that they had one customer from Japan who runs like this really nice restaurant in Japan, flew to Australia and bought $25 million worth of meat to ship back to Japan. So that's just like one customer. So I was like, whoa. Because he had to come to Australia to see it in person to make sure it was high enough quality for the restaurant. And so I'm just imagining if that's one customer who's like running a high-end restaurant in Japan, like imagine how many other deals are going on in other areas. So we definitely have a lot of exports. I know we export a lot of wine and whatnot to China and that sort of stuff. So
yeah, and I mean, this podcast isn't about Australia, but I do want to note for a lot of people, they may not realize just the population of Australia is pretty small. It's like maybe 25, 30 million people. Like
that's it. Yeah, 25. It might not even be 25. I think it just under 25. But yeah, it's definitely around that. Brisbane, the city that I live in, is like 2 to 2.5 million. I think Sydney is number one at about 3.5 to 4 million. Melbourne's around 3 to 3.5, around that. And so that's about over 50% of the population is just on the East Coast in 3 major cities. And then so it's decreasing after that. So
and to put that in context, that's smaller than the population of Texas, just one of the 50 states.
What?
One of the bigger. Yeah.
Wow,
Texas
I didn't know it was just Texas.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
So it's like we hear all this stuff about Australia. Of course, it's like a big pop cult. Like so many amazing musicians, especially from the past 15 years or so come out of Australia, but it's actually not that many people, especially when you compare it to like China, the big, economic superpower of the region over there, right?
Hey,
so
we're small but mighty, down here in Australia,
tiny but
all
mighty.
the way down.
Yeah, very cool. So that's so cool. So you got to learn some language, and I just want to back up and talk about those two meta skills you talk about: learning how to learn, and then learning how to take what you've just learned and communicate it to people. Like you may have not realized it at the time, but you were basically learning everything you needed to know to be a successful tutorial creator, probably. Like, would you say that's the case?
Yeah. So I didn't even. Yeah. It's again, hindsight's 20/20, right? Like you can look back and go, wow, that's how you can apply that to this. And so that's a really hard thing when people say, oh, you need experience for jobs and whatnot. And it's like it's sometimes the experience that you have isn't that quantifiable. Whereas like, yeah, if I have a degree in XYZ, that's really quantifiable. But then there's other things like I've talked to 5,000 people. I'm not sure how many resumes, like you'll see that sort of as a extracurriculum kind of thing, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But also my dad was a teacher. And so I kind of, I guess, that was just in nature and nurture as I was growing up. And we ran a family swim school, like that was our family business. And so I was a swimming coach from basically 13 onwards, growing up in the business and just interacting with customers of our business and learning how to teach swimming to children and people the same age as me. And so I feel like looking back, it's you kind of realize it's like, oh, that actually helped for this, that actually helped for that, and you kind of piece the puzzle together.
Yeah. Well, that's so cool. It sounds like you had like a pretty industrious upbringing. I didn't even realize you were like a swim instructor. I guess with all the water around, it makes sense to get really good at swimming.
I don't like pools very much anymore though, because I spent basically every day in a pool for 10 years.
Wow. So like one of the things that people enjoy unwinding with, you're just dreading it, like, oh, not the pool again.
Huh?
You're ruined for
just
pools.
as a kid, I was like, well, as long as if it's fresh water, like it's like okay, but it's like because chlorine, like I just always smelled like chlorine as a kid, and then it's just like no, I'm like if the pool's chlorine, it's like I'll happily skip that. I'll just wait till we go to the beach or something.
Yeah. So let's talk about, your progression into the workforce, not just as like a service sector. I mean, like that's a really cool thing to be able to claim. Like I helped 5,000, not just talk to 5,000 people, but like help them solve their problems, right? At the Apple App Store over the course of like 3 years. And sometimes even using foreign languages in the process. Can you talk about like how you ultimately transitioned into software development?
Yeah. So 2016, I studied languages working part-time at Apple. And then the start of 2017 was when I was like, okay, I always wanted to like basically code apps or build something that I was using these computers every day. And I'm like, I want to build something that's like of my own. And so the start of 2017, I think it was about February, I was just like, I handed in my resignation to Apple, and my friend who worked there as well handed in his resignation at the same time. And then we're like, okay, we're going to work on a startup together. And so this is where freeCodeCamp came into play. We were learning web development, and we were going to the gym, and we were like, it really sucks that we can't work out together because you go to gym X and I go to gym Y. And so we started to build a website that we were like, Airbnb was getting really big, and we were like, there should be an Airbnb for gyms. And so that's what we started to build, was Any Gym. And we built out the website. It wasn't coded from scratch, so it wasn't quite freeCodeCamp spec. It was just WordPress and like a bunch of different plugins like maps and all these sort of things. But we were piecing it together. It looked pretty good from a design standpoint. But then we're like, okay, now we have this website, but now we need customers. And so because in retrospect, I didn't even know that it was a marketplace. But that's what it was. I was just like, okay, wait.
Yeah, Airbnb, like a two-sided marketplace.
That's what I mean, yeah. Sorry, yeah, you're right. Like, yeah, Airbnb has the marketplace of the hosts, of people who put up their homes or apartments and that sort of stuff, and then it has the customers who rent space in those. And so in our case, the hosts would be the gyms, so they would offer their gym space that already exists, and the customers would be people like me and my friend who didn't necessarily want a membership there, or like Airbnb. You don't want to rent the place for a year, you just want to stay in there for 3 or 4 nights. And then the same with any gym was, I just want to go for a session and I want that to be easy rather than to walk in, sign all the forms, pay the fee, get harassed by gym consultants, all that sort of stuff. I just want to pay whatever it is and do one session and be done. And so we all thought, yeah, that's great in our heads.
Yeah.
And
I
so
mean, I can tell you from having gone to like my friend's gym, like I want to be a guest. And then like you work out for like 20 minutes or something, you're like, all right, let's jet. And then there's a sales guy who corners you, takes you in a room, like, hey, you got to sign up and do like all this.
Exactly.
Gives you the hard sell, right? Like, I don't want that. I just want to be able to walk out. Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like there's still room for some. I'm not working on this now. Like the startup didn't work because, but I still feel like there's room for it if you could work out the right model and get the gyms on board and get safety, all that sort of jazz ready. But we were like, okay, we've got map, we can find gyms in the local area using Google Maps API, and then we're like, well, we actually need to get, like, we can't just have people rocking up to these gyms. Like, we don't have like passes or anything. And so we were like, okay, we're just going to go on foot. And so we just mapped out like a section of the town, like near where his apartment was. And we're like, there's 10 gyms in this area. Let's just walk to them today and talk to them. And again, young and naive, just like going through, like, hey, this is our cool service. We want to get you more customers. And we started talking to them. And then we kind of quickly realized that we didn't have a business unless we could get the gyms on board. And we then also realized that after we got pretty close with one of the gym managers, and they were sort of like, I like this idea, but look at this. And then they showed us their sort of numbers, and they had 2,000 clients signed up, but only 100 of them would come more than once a week. And so he basically told us that their business model depends on people not showing up. And so I was like, because if all 2,000 people came at one point, the gym would obviously be overrun, right? And so
so it's almost like you're solving a problem that is actually like a feature, not a bug, of the way the gyms work.
Correct, yes. And so we wanted more people to come to the gym, but they're like, we don't want more people. We want more people signed up and have those memberships that you forget about and just do the direct debit every week or month or whatever it is. And you don't come to the gym. And so we were just like, oh, and then we kind of went to another gym. We kind of realized that that's just a repeating function that you get all these people who sign up for the gym at the start of the year and then go 5 times in January. And then basically the curve just drops off. You go 4 times in February, 3 times in March, and then by June, you've forgotten about it and you're doing something else. And then, of course, the hurdle to cancel it is not just like, I'd like to cancel my gym membership. It's like, talk to our sales guy about why you'd like to cancel it. And so in theory, it was a great business, but then in practice, it was like, oh, okay, the gyms depend on people not showing up. And so if we were trying to charge a smaller fee for a one-off, it doesn't help their business.
Yeah. I mean, like some of these, like at least in the U.S., sorry to go on like a long tangent about gyms.
No, you're right.
But in the U.S., there was like this big chain of like gyms. It was like, I think it was like Bally's or something like that. And they like signed people up for like these 5-10 year contracts or something like that. And they literally went out of business and people still had to pay for the next 5 years. They're like no longer rendering services, but the contract was so ironclad that people had to continue to pay for the next 5 years, and they didn't get any gym in return. It was just going to like the creditors of the gym or whatever. Yeah. So,
well, that's what I mean.
I use the YMCA. The YMCA here in the U.S., it's a charity. They probably have them in Australia too. It's a charity that was started 150 years ago, and they may use some pushy techniques, but like my experience has been like we just go there. We have like a family membership. Whenever we travel, like over the summer, I'll often go to like Asia because my kids live in Asia. Or I'm sorry, my grandparents live in Asia. My wife's from China. We met in grad school. And we might like leave, and we can just go in and we can freeze the membership for 2 months, and we don't have to pay anything. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, see?
And so, like,
It's
I
simple.
hope more gyms adopt that approach of like building up a reputation over like 150 years, and like just being a chill, wholesome place to work out rather than like being pushy and like using these techniques. But I can definitely see, based on everything you said, that this would be like a non-starter of a business.
Exactly, right? Like, it was so perfect in our heads, and then, yeah, in reality, and I think that's like just another, again, in retrospect, like an important thing of like, okay, well, we test as soon as possible in the real world. Like, does this actually work? Because many great ideas are in theory, but then in do they translate to reality? Well,
Yeah.
you got to test for it, right?
Well, since we're talking earlier about China and Chinese, I will take the opportunity to share one of those beautiful 4-character idioms in Chinese.
Yeah.
闭门载车, which is close the doors and build the chariot. There was this like old inventor from like ancient China when, of course, all these like 4-character idioms came about, and he had this vision, this kind of like platonic ideal of like what a car should be, like the concept car, like the Cybertruck of his day, right? And so he goes in and he like builds it and everything, and he's making all these fine tunements based on his theory. He's theory crafting, right? But he never actually takes it out on the road. And when his masterpiece is finally done, he takes it out on the road, just falls apart. It doesn't work at all. And so he sunk all that time into it. He closed the doors and built the chariot when he should have been doing what you did very early on, which is go out and actually talk to people running the gyms. Like, I could easily see you and your friends spending like months developing this prototype before you went out and got that user research done. And so it sounds like you dodged a bullet by just quickly discovering, oh, this is not going to happen, because the fundamental economics and the incentives of the people in this space dictate that Airbnb for gyms is not like a great idea. And I've frequently said Airbnb is not a great idea, and I'm amazed that people actually let strangers into their house to stay like for short periods of time when they're not like professional hotels that know what they're doing, you know. But yeah, like kudos to you for quickly iterating on your idea and incorporating the feedback. So did it become apparent pretty quickly that you should just scupper this idea and move on to something else?
Yeah, well, my memory is probably a bit hazy on exact timelines, but let's just say it's a few months. We probably spent a couple of weeks, because we had no jobs. So it was kind of like we're living off savings, and my friend had an apartment at West End, which is a suburb towards the city in Brisbane.
Yeah.
And I was just like basically sleeping on his couch and studying through the day, trying to build this website.
Yeah.
And then because he lived close to a few gyms, we went around and we're like, well, we should probably test this quite quickly, because we wanted to start making money, because, again, we had no jobs and we're just living off savings. So we found out, I would say it was definitely not longer than 6 months, and probably closer to 3 to 4 that we were working on that. Because the website, truth be told, was quite simplistic. You had a place to sign up for customers, and a place to find gyms, and then a place for... again, we'd probably have to work out a lot of the payment system as it works, but it's like no point having a great payment system if no money's flowing through.
Right. So
So,
it sounds like this was like the mother of all kind of practice projects, almost like you were getting to turn around and apply your nascent coding skills to immediately build out this product. And you know.
Well, it was a problem that we had. Like, it was like there was a group of us at working at the Apple store that would, like, we were all into gym, but because the store was in the middle of the city, you had people who lived everywhere around the city. And so it was unfeasible to always just go one direction. We just wanted to stay in the city and go somewhere just local. So it just made sense to us of like, as if you'd go to a restaurant, you just walk in and buy a meal. We're like, we want that workflow to work for gyms, instead of, walk in, sign the form, get 100 text messages from someone asking you if you want to sign up. It's just like, no, a simple transaction, you know? And like, I think Apple Pay was out by that stage. I'm not entirely sure. So it's like, it could just be a pass that you just walk in and scan.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was maybe it could work these days. I think ClassPass is like another big startup that was doing something similar. I think they actually got funding and maybe made it to profitability. I'm not entirely sure, but that was my dive into web development. And then pretty quickly after that, I realized that web development for me was far too tedious. I'm like, I want to do programming because I was like, I have to build the workflow for that to go to there, to go to there, that to go there. Like just every block. Like again, this is my laziness kicking in. I was like, how could I? The whole point of this was to automate the stuff. But right now, I'm just building everything step by step. And then of course, machine learning was. Before it was really called AI, it was on the rise. And then basically every tech podcast that I listened to or YouTube video that I watched was about technology, and then someone would talk about machine learning. And then I was like, what is this? And then I started to research into machine learning, and then I was like, oh, so you just tell the computer, here's my stuff, you learn the patterns. And I was like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I want to use computers for.
So it's like the laziness creeping back in. Like,
exactly,
hey, computer
right?
can do the hard work for me.
You do the work. Yeah, exactly. And so, that just began the fascination. I think I probably discovered it properly in the middle of 2017 because I left Apple at the start of 2017. And then we worked on the startup for a few months. Canned it because it's like, well, we've spoken to enough gyms now. I bet you this is the case around every gym. And also we're young and naive. I'm like 24 or 25 or whatnot and have no money. So it's like, if we had millions of funding, we could probably sway the gyms in some way, but we were like bootstrapping the whole thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, so middle of 2017, started to get into machine learning, and on the weekends I was driving Uber. So to support myself. So I was still living at home with my parents. And so I had a pretty strict routine for, I guess, 9 to 12 months of just Monday to Friday, study machine learning, and Friday night, Saturday afternoon to night, and Sunday morning-ish, drive Uber. Because they were the best days in terms of economics. Friday night, everyone's going out. Saturday night. So I was a hermit for like a good solid year. And this is where I sort of, middle of 2017, discovered like machine learning. End of 2017, like September or close to the end, I created my own AI master's degree, which was just, I'd kind of done enough 2 to 3 months of like foundation stuff in terms of to realize what was the overarching skills needed for it. And then I'm like, okay, well, I've got this skill of learning how to learn, so I'm just going to create my own curriculum using online resources that are kind of just a collation of, I guess, lists of AI resources that I'm like, these look like pretty good. And I just put them in just a blog post of basically, I don't know, let's say 10 resources. The number is a bit arbitrary. It's still on my website. And I'm like, okay, over the next, and I was publishing it publicly online to basically no one, but I wanted to just have a public record to keep me accountable. So I'm like, over the next X amount of time, I'm going to go through these resources and get these skills, and then I'll just get a job in machine learning. That was my thinking.
So you were using like your blog post and social media as a kind of an accountability mechanism to like a commitment device, essentially. Like, correct. I'm going to learn all this stuff, and everybody's like, good luck. I'll look forward to hearing about the results of you learning all this stuff. And then you're like, oh damn, I can't quit now. Everybody's waiting for me to share my results.
Well, that's exactly 100%. That's exactly what I wanted to do. And well, one, because accountability. Two, because I'm a very I like interacting with other people who are interested in. I think that's quite natural to just interact with people who are interested in what you're interested in. Yeah. And this is 2017, so machine learning and AI is nowhere near as popular as it is now. It was certainly gaining traction. Yeah. But
certainly when ChatGPT came out, everybody updated their LinkedIn profile. AI
exactly.
engineer, or machine learning
so
engineer.
It's no longer, I had to update all my courses, It's no longer teaching machine learning. It's teaching AI and machine learning. but yeah, that isn't a marketing gimmick, by the way. That's the fundamental technologies are still the same between machine learning and AI. AI is just a sort of, a bit more of a hyped up term at the moment. But
yeah, and it wasn't for a long time, by the way. A lot of people so a little history lesson. AI has like winters and summers, right? So like in the 1950s, the U.S. government's like, we think we can create like human level intelligence within like 10 months or something with this team of like university researchers. And of course that didn't work out, right? And then later they're like, oh, well, now we've got an AI that can beat Gary Kasparov at chess, Deep Blue, IBM, right? Or we've got Watson that can beat everybody at Jeopardy because it can hit the buzzer at superhuman rates before people can even hit the buzzer, so they can't compete with it, right? like there are all these like
we've had many. Yeah, you're right. I think it's almost every 10 to 15 years we get a new technology that's going to replace humans.
Yeah.
So that's very well. You're right. That's very well historically documented, right back from the 20s almost.
And
then
the mechanical turk. Now, if we can
out,
just get this to do it by itself without having a human underneath the chess player. Right? But
exactly.
Sorry for going off on a tangent.
No,
but
I like it.
I think it's important.
That's important to have context. Yeah.
Yeah, because machine learning engineer for a while was like basically machine learning. You'd say that instead of AI. Because there was a stigma associated with AI because AI had disappointed so many people, let people down. You keep saying that HAL 9000 is just around the corner, the Skynet just around the corner, and yet this AI can barely do anything. So people were oversold. And you could say to some extent there's so much hype around AI that we're being oversold right now. But at the same time, I use GPT-4 all the time. I use it several times a day. There's something there, right? It's not all just sizzle and no steak. This time there is real utility.
I totally agree. Yeah, same with me. I use AI tools. I think now it's a lot more customer facing, as in it's you can see what's happening with AI tools now. Whereas in the background with predictive models, so generative models, the difference between predictive and predictive AI and generative AI. Predictive, you're sort of predicting is your email spam or not spam, as in it's a set number of classes. There's a confined output, whereas generative is kind of the output space is almost infinite. It's still constrained to the distribution of data that the model has seen, but it's certainly a lot wider than just a unique set of different labels. So now, for the last, I guess, maybe 8-10 years, we've had predictive AI running behind the scenes for credit card transactions, for battery optimization, for email classification, for audio quality optimization. But all these things are sort of behind the scenes. Whereas now I feel like the reason why it's getting a lot more traction now is because it's generative. We can all interact with it with language, with image, and soon many more modalities.
Yeah, it's super duper exciting, and I don't mean to denigrate the effort of all the AI engineering and all the breakthroughs and everything. I just wanted to point out that the machine learning term, it's synonymous with AI, right? Would you say that's accurate?
Yes. Well, that's how I use it. I guess you'd probably have people who want to sort of define it a bit more, but to me, it's there's one big umbrella up the top, and that's AI, artificial intelligence. Actually, funny story about AI. I told my grandfather a few years ago when I was first studying AI, and he thought it was artificial insemination, which is
yes, something related to fertility.
Impregnate cattle, artificially. But no, it's it's to do with technology. So that just goes to show how quickly technology can change. That's only 2 generations, my granddad to my parents to me, and it's all of a sudden we have totally new nomenclatures for different paradigms. Anyway, AI is up the top for me, at the big umbrella, and then under that is machine learning, and then under that is deep learning. And so really, if we're being really specific, all of the AI that's currently generative AI is being powered by deep learning. And so that's a subset of machine learning, and machine learning is a subset of the field of AI.
Okay. Yeah,
that's how I think about it.
That's a great little kind of pyramid, if you want to think about those different terms and how they relate to one another. One question a lot of people ask me is, data science. How is that related to AI?
Yes, so data science would be, to me, is in, I guess, a part of AI as well. Because AI is just, I mean, what's intelligence? It's pretty broad, right? So data science to me is using data to predict things. So you're trying to formulate hypothesis and seeing if the data falsifies it or proves it somewhat correct. And so, whereas data analytics is you're analyzing the past. So data science to me is predicting the future. Data analytics analyze the past. So what has happened? That's a little nuance that helps me get through that.
Yeah.
And then within data science, if you're trying to predict the future based on data, one of the techniques you can use is machine learning. So you write an algorithm that is going to sift through much more data than any one person could ever look at and try to form a predictive model so that given a similar source of data, you can predict something in the future.
Yeah.
Now, again, it's all probabilistic, so it's not a magic box, but it can sort of give you some insight into what it might be.
Yeah. And so, for example, like one application of predictive models would be figuring out what the next good move is in a game of Go. The game with the stones, for example, like the DeepMind AlphaGo algorithm, AI system, whatever you want to call it, that was able to master this ancient Chinese game that's like 5,000 years old that is many, many orders of magnitude more complicated than chess in terms of the possible moves you can make and the complexity of different strategies and everything like that. And my understanding is they took a huge data set of previously played Go games that have been recorded step by step, just like with chess. They've got like their notation to record like who moved where and put stones where. And essentially they use that as the training data. And so initially, like that whole model is to predict what the next, like the highest confidence interval or like the highest, expected value move is when you're putting a piece on the Go board, right? And so we're talking about a superhuman data. Like you could be a Go encyclopedic, Go player. You could potentially even have like some sort of neurodivergent quirk where you could literally remember full games of Go, but you wouldn't be able to consume the entire corpus of all the games that these AI systems can consume. And eventually they stopped even feeding it trading data and they just like had it play against itself a whole lot for hundreds of years.
100%,
simulated, right? It does not matter how smart you are. You cannot play against yourself for hundreds of years because
accelerate time.
You're going to die, right? So when we talk about superhuman, models and like these can do useful things that humans simply cannot do. There are real world limitations on the extent of like human intelligence, right? So that's what's so exciting about it for me, like watching like the Go or watching like the AI that plays StarCraft against the best, Korean StarCraft players and stuff like that, and like just the applications of these to see interesting things that come out. That I think is like. That is what really gets me hyped up as somebody who enjoys games and stuff.
Well, the StarCraft one to me is really fascinating because that requires like team interaction versus like the Go one is obviously very impressive, but it's sort of you're solo and your board state is influenced. Sure, you're influenced by an opposition, but you're largely your actions influence the board state as well. But then you have like, what was it called? Or Dota, or StarCraft or whatnot.
Defense of the
Whereas
Nations.
you have like a team of 5 versus another team of 5, and it's like, okay, now you have multiple people influencing multiple things. And like these people, if you're like a newcomer, you could play Dota or StarCraft for 5 years, but then someone who's an expert at it just comes and wipes the floor with you, like, and you have zero chance. But then these AIs can train for a month in computer simulated time, and then they're going up against the world champions who are so far removed from the average player, it's ridiculous. But then the AI is catching up in a month of simulation.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably a foregone conclusion that we have artificial general intelligence given like the constraints of just the human mind and the fact that like we're working with something that evolved to like find calories and like avoid predators and stuff, and they're working with like basically the fruits of like the finest engineering minds from the past, 100 years, and then all the mathematicians and philosophers and everybody else that was also kind of like seminal in creating the corpus upon which like those technologies sit upon, right? Like,
yeah.
I mean, I would be really amazed if we didn't have systems that were way smarter than human beings within the next 50 or 100 years in some dimensions. I'm not sure that we'll have, what are your thoughts on, so we can talk a lot more about AI, because one of the things I want to talk about is how should somebody approach learning these things? Because frankly, I think everybody who's interested in technology should learn about these things. But the question is, how do they go about doing it? You just did that. What would be your high-level advice to people who want to just start? Let's say they just know a little bit about programming technology. They know how to use, a browser. Maybe they know a little bit of like a scripting language like Python. Maybe they've used Microsoft Access or even SQL or something like that. So they have like basic knowledge of like how to get stuff done with computers. How do they go from there to where you are in terms of building your own models and getting things done with these tools?
Well, I feel like, there's almost an unlimited amount of approaches, but if you're just, let's say you're just comfortable using a computer, but you want to get into using AI stuff, I would say that the tried and true way, the way that I did it, was just relentlessly follow your curiosity. And it sounds like trite, but it's like, that's just going to fuel you through. Like, I had to do it I realized that I needed a sort of a structured curiosity following. That's why I created my own rough path of like courses to follow to build a foundational knowledge. And then after that, once I'd had the foundational knowledge, I just went and I'm going to just relentlessly follow this. So that was my path. And I feel like that's, obviously I'm biased, but I feel like if you don't want to go to college or back to school or whatnot, the resources on the internet are the best you're going to get, especially in this new field. Well, not new field, but in the current climate of AI, the universities and colleges just don't catch up as fast as the field moves. However, that does not to say if you're already involved in a computer science or mathematic or some sort of technology related or any related degree or something at school, because these technologies are so wide ranging, I am actually of in big favor of, we need people who are well trained in non-technological backgrounds to pick up these skills, so that it's not just a bunch of computer nerds running the AI world. We need people who are well versed in many different fields, offering insight, because what a lot of engineers, and I'm guilty of this, and people who are in tech, are sort of, one downside is that they build solutions because that's what they like to do. They're engineers, right. But then the solutions don't map to the actual real world. Like say, for example, a healthcare solution was built by engineers, but then you start to talk to nurses and people who actually provide healthcare, and they say that's just not going to work because we have to. I remember in my machine learning job, perfect case of this is that we were before transcription got really quite good, like as it is now. You can download a model from Hugging Face and you can get almost flawless transcription, at least definitely usable transcription. We were building models to transcribe doctor's notes. So you go to a doctor's appointment, and instead of the doctor there typing on the keyboard while you're talking, it would just automatically write down what you were speaking. So you had a record there.
Yeah.
So we're building this system. The model worked pretty good, at least good for 2018 standards. And then we went to deliver it to the system, and we I was speaking to the business dev or the business person that was running it, and their whole goal was they found out that on average a doctor spends 5 minutes during each appointment to type notes, and they wanted to make that basically 0. And that way, a doctor could see like 3 more patients a day if you add that up.
Of course,
and then just in my head, I'm like, sort of, okay, that works fantastic from an economic standpoint, But I'm like, why do people go to the doctor in the first place? I actually asked that in a meeting, and I kind of got looked at like very like, what are you talking about? Like, what? Of course, people go to a doctor because they're sick. And I'm like, yeah, they might be sick, but they're also going for empathy and to chat with another human being. And if we're just basically going, oh yeah, you save 5 minutes, so now you can see 3 more patients a day. It's just like a factory line of like people in and out. Maybe that extra 5 minutes, the doctor could actually talk to the person of like, how's your family? How's your wife? How's your kids? All that sort of stuff. And like get to know the person. And again, it can't be proven in like medical terms, but the spiritual sort of side of me feels like that is almost as healing as like prescribing a drug or a treatment.
Yeah.
Of just someone caring about your problem.
The whole notion of bedside manner from your doctor.
Yeah.
Essentially, like they care, that they're not just, that you're not just numbers on a chart, that you're not just like this graph or this scan that they're looking at, oh, blah, 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 blah. Like they actually look at you, they actually connect with you. I mean, that's like, you know, I've changed doctors a lot over the years.
Yeah.
And that's one of the most common reasons. Like, oh, it doesn't seem like they even give a damn about me. Like, I'm just another, appointment, and they got to dash out the door to the next one. They don't even bother sitting down. Like those are all flags for me, red flags that I need to find a different, primary care physician. So, yeah. And those are the kinds of things that you learn from being out in the field, not building the chariot behind closed doors, but actually going out there. But was that the lesson what you were trying to tell, or was it something different? Like,
well, that's what I was saying. It's like, if you want to get into so the initial question was, how to best get into it. And again, I don't have the best. I only really have my experience. And my experience is there are a lot of things that you'll see in the tech field that are sort of almost too techy. As in, like, you can, yes, there are fundamental skills that you are going to have to learn, which is programming in some sense. And the language of AI at the moment is Python programming language.
Yeah.
You basically can't go wrong if you start with that. And then writing code. A lot of people tell me, I'm scared of the math of AI and ML. And it is all math. I'm not going to talk away from that. It is writing computer code to trigger math at scale. That's like AI algorithms in a nutshell. However, these days I deal with 99% code rather than math. So I'm not an expert in math. I don't have a background. I don't have a mathematics degree, but I can write computer code to run that math, and the computer's going to implement that for me. And so I'm more interested in the practical side of writing the code to implement things than doing the research into the mathematical foundations of the algorithm to find new algorithms. I'm more interested in applying existing techniques to things that I find interesting rather than reinventing completely new techniques. So there's two kind of sides to it. A lot gets in the field. There's kind of the AI and machine learning research, and I would say if you want to go into that and be a researcher, you're going to need to learn the mathematics inside and out, because that's what the researchers are doing.
And let's say you want to do research, is that like you should just stay at a university generally, or
I would
like
say
what
that's
would your
the
advice?
best part. Yes, that would be the best path for. Again, the internet, there is no limits. There's a website called Archive, which is arxiv.org, which basically all the new machine learning research gets published to that, and it's free. So truly, if you just wanted to sit at home and you have hours per day to read through Archive, you can just create your own self-study, like Facebook, Google, MIT, Stanford, all publish their research papers to Archive, and then the code will be on GitHub. So if you wanted to just find your own self way, and then there's communities on Discord these days, which are like, basically all of those resources are completely free. So if you have the discipline to go through that yourself, by all means. But if you're just getting started, you're at college already, you're studying a technology thing, mathematics, whatnot, and you want to go to research, I would stick with that path. But then also just always remember that there are resources outside of college that are very accessible. So that's the research side of things. But practicality-wise, I would say if you come from a different background, that's also really cool, because now you have a different set of knowledge that you can sort of start to see what AI is capable of and go, how can I apply this to my current field? And that's kind of what I'm doing now. As in, I studied food science and nutrition at university, and now my brother and I are working on a startup called Nutrify, which is, at the moment, it's like a Pokedex for food. So, or Shazam for food. You take a photo of food and it will tell you about it. So it uses computer vision and then maps that to nutrition data, and then you can create a food diary, get nutritional insights from that. So that's my practical standpoint, is I have studied food science and nutrition, and now I've kind of got versed in AI technologies. I'm trying to marry the two.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the difference between, like, research is the academic way of, like, you're just trying to push the field forward in terms of studying new algorithms, building new algorithms, going through research papers and trying to collate the best things. And again, it's a very big overlap too with the practical side of things, of building a solution that other people can actually use. But I would say that the building the practical solution that other people can use is a lot more code heavy, versus the research is still code heavy, but also there's a lot more math involved.
Yeah. So, like, freeCodeCamp, for example, we're teaching applied mathematics, and it's always got to focus on, okay, how do you actually implement this in Python? So if you look at the algebra course that we published a few months ago, and we've got a pre-calculus course coming in a couple months, and we're going to have all the engineering math that you would get at, like, at a big top computer science program here in the U.S. would be like MIT, Caltech, Stanford. But what we're doing is, instead of focusing on, like, okay, let's draw out all these formulas on the whiteboard and stuff like that, you still kind of learn that, but it's all about, okay, let's implement this in code. Because any mathematical expression can be implemented in code, right? Like, you see that summation symbol, the big scary, I think it's like an epsilon, I can't remember all the Greek letters, but, like, that's just a for loop, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, like, and like all these different variables you pull in and stuff, like order of operations, all this stuff, that's all code, right? You can implement math in code. And Python, as you said, is like the language du jour. People aren't using R as much, or Julia, Lang, or these other computational languages. I mean, you can certainly use that, but you can't go wrong with Python. There's, like, Python libraries for pretty much everything, right, that you need to do in machine learning.
Yeah, and I feel like, the language of AI these days or the framework of AI and deep learning is PyTorch, and Py is Python. So, PyTorch is a framework for deep learning, and it's all accessible in Python. You can write machine learning code in basically any programming language, but Python is where you want to be. If you're starting from zero and learning to program like today, or learning to code, I would 100% recommend Python.
Yeah, and PyTorch, like, so that's like the Facebook open source project for machine learning, and then there's also TensorFlow, which we have courses on both, which is also another Python machine learning library that's created by Google. And all these tools are, like, open source. They're free. You don't have to pay for MATLAB or, like a site license or like a lot of these other tools that are frankly pretty expensive. And the Python ecosystem is just amazing. So yeah, I think it's cool that you do so much and you have tutorials on so many of these tools in Python. Your most popular video ever, I think, is a PyTorch video. And one of your other most popular videos is TensorFlow. These are like 10-hour videos, 25-hour videos that are literally just like
in a day.
Yeah, literally a day. Like, just drink your energy drink and crack your knuckles, and let's do some machine learning, right? So I want to fire off a lot of questions. So just to recap what you were saying, because you had so many insights there, and I want to try to, like, break it down for everybody listening. So there's the applied side, the engineering side, and then there's the science side. If you want to be an engineer, start engineering, right? Start grabbing tools off the shelf and start applying them to problems. If you want to be a scientist, there's something to be said for being in the ivory tower and going to just get a PhD. But there are sites like Archive. I'm not sure exactly how it's pronounced, but Yeah, like I think it's like from a Cornell or something like that. Like I'll link to that in the show notes. We're going to put links to a lot of stuff we talk about in the show notes, in the video description if you're watching this on YouTube. But one of the interesting things that I think you said is whatever domain expertise you already have, in your case, nutrition, you can bring that from wherever you are. Learning to code is kind of a skill that you layer on top of your existing domain expertise. Like I'm a teacher. I was a school director, right? Like learning to code for me was just a skill that would allow me to get new things done as a teacher, right? Like freeCodeCamp is partially like I'm just one of many, many, many people who've worked on freeCodeCamp, but it's like an expression of my interest in education and, applying that using coding, right? Same thing with like learning a foreign language. You're just allowing yourself to go and do whatever it is you do. If you're a doctor and you learn Spanish, bam, now you can go to like Latin America and help people, right? If there's like an earthquake there, you can potentially go down there and be a relief worker or something like that, right? So it's just another tool through which you can express your expertise. And so I think it's really interesting that you have this domain expertise that you already built up, and you're still in the space. You're still building, health and nutrition, wellness type tools, but you're applying the machine learning skills that you have to get those things done. That's so cool. Yeah. So I want to just fire off a lot of really quick questions. So one thing that like people always say to me is like, oh, I want to do machine learning, but I don't have the GPU or whatever. Like, it used to be like coding. I'm like, oh, cool. Like I used like a netbook, which was like $300. It had 2 gigabytes of RAM. And like I used that for like 2 or 3 years when I first started learning the code. Learning the code, technically, you don't really need a lot of computational power. You're just, writing loops and building algorithms and data structures and stuff. But with machine learning, you do kind of need some hardware to get somewhere, right?
Yeah. So I would say, if you're okay, let's just talk from beginner level. Like if you're just getting into programming, any modern laptop will do. A MacBook Air, or I've been using Apple for a while now, so I'm not quite familiar with the most recent Windows laptops, but any one of those will do. So you can get started learning all the basic sort of stuff, but then as I don't want to downplay it and say that it's basic. You can get quite far using a standard desktop machine. But then if you want to start getting into more and more advanced, using bigger models, training your own state-of-the-art AI models, then that's where you're going to need more compute power. So, for example, I do 90% of my work day-to-day on a M1 MacBook Pro. But then when I train deep learning models and... Sorry, there's a car starting. That's my housemate leaving. When I train deep learning models, I write the code on my MacBook Pro, but then it sends it to... I've got a PC in my closet with a big GPU in there, and it trains the model on there. And then I take the model from that, and I deploy it to a smartphone in the case of Nutrify. But then, if you want to go even higher, to build something like ChatGPT, you're going to need a warehouse full of computers. And so there's quite a large scale there. However, if you're... I tend towards, like, all my courses are beginner friendly, right? So I tend to... I'm a big advocate for the little guy. The person hacking around on their computer and trying to build something that can scale to 1 million people if you really wanted it to. And so I don't have access to thousands of GPUs like Meta, Facebook, Microsoft. Meta and Facebook are the same people. Anyway, I don't have access to a warehouse of computers. So I'm mainly interested in... And the field, this is a little bit kind of... it's something you kind of... I don't realize it because I'm so embedded in the field, but it's something that it's a really big blessing when you get into the field, is that there's such an open culture in machine learning. Like as I said, most of the research papers are published free to read, which is actually quite different to a lot of other fields. And a lot of the research papers come with the code. So here's the code you can run on your own computer to implement it. And then finally, here is the trained model that you can use on your own computer. So you may not necessarily... And the benefit of this is that the trained model, they may have been trained by researchers using, let's say, 10 or 8 NVIDIA GPUs that are worth $20,000 each. So it's a $160,000 machine. It's trained for 3 days on that machine. they're going to release that model for you, so you don't have to repeat the training. You've already got the finished product, and you can apply that on your machine. Now, whether you'll be able to run that at scale is another question. So this is quite a bit of a rabbit hole, but I'll just keep going with it. Is that what I'm saying is you can have a consumer level machine and then run these models that larger enterprises have released, and then you can start to build with things like that. And so one of the biggest expenses in compute power for a machine learning model or a deep learning model is the pre-training. So training it, and the pre-training is the P in GPT, so pre-training.
Mm-hmm.
That can often take weeks and months for some models, literally weeks and months of time. So you'll have, in the case of GPT, I don't think they released the exact numbers, but I feel like having a computer, like 1,000 GPUs or maybe more, 10,000 running simultaneously for 3 months is not an understatement. So that just goes to show you, like,
billions of dollars to train these models. That's what, in some cases.
We're not. Yeah, we'll be in the billions soon. I think the $1 billion training run will probably happen in the next 3 years or so. But definitely multi millions. Like we're talking. I think Llama 2 from Facebook was like a $10 million training run. And so then now we can use with frameworks like MLX from Apple, we can run those models on MacBooks. So that's really cool. And then you have other tools, like if you're running on a consumer machine, you can go to Google Colab, which is a free resource, basically like Google Docs, but for computing. And you can run Python code, you can access free GPUs. So a GPU is a graphical processing unit that is very good at doing parallel computations, which is what you need to do in machine learning. You need to run numerical calculations, and you need to do a lot of them to find patterns in data. And so GPUs just happen to be really good at doing many computations simultaneously, so you can find those patterns faster. And so frameworks like PyTorch allow you to build models, load models, and you've got Hugging Face Transformers, free open source library. You can load pre-trained models into your Google Colab instance and then start to build from there. So as a practical example, the other day, like my friend works for an insurance company, and one of their big problems is, I'm getting fireworks on my thing.
Well, yeah, your Apple gestures thing turned on. For anybody who is listening to the audio version, you have to turn that off if you use an Apple. If you do double thumbs up and you have it turned on, which it is by default, you'll see like these fireworks. So
I didn't even know
Daniel just
that.
triggered that.
That's hilarious.
It's a delightful way to learn about it in real time.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I just had fireworks behind me.
Yeah. So you were talking about your friend at the insurance company.
Yes. So he was using Google Colab to do some research on the insurance document. So as you can imagine, insurance companies have a lot of files and a lot of sort of information, cases to dig through. And then he was using Google Colab to download a pre-trained language model to basically read through email threads to find like who was at fault, who was the person making the claim, what was the amount, what was the date, and then structure that data from just raw text of the email thread, which is kind of very tedious to go through. Then would have the language model automatically turn that into JSON, which is a structured data pattern, which is much easier to navigate. So that's just like one of many examples of how someone from like an insurance field, not exactly fully related to AI, can start to use AI tools to help them for their workflow.
Yeah, I mean, just like software in general, like anything you're doing that is tedious that you can describe really well, historically you wouldn't necessarily be able to do that. You might be able to describe in great detail exactly how you look at different photos and determine whether they need moderator attention or not, right? Like if you, let's say you're working with Facebook's many like moderator kind of like data center or call center type places where you're like going through and like checking every photo that somebody has flagged on Facebook, for example. Like you might be able to very accurately describe using words how you would go about determining whether a photo was inappropriate and needed to be removed. But it was very hard to teach a computer to do that until now. Now it's like we've got like so much more powerful models, and it's just like that like kind of evolutionary leap. And so now, like, I would never have trusted a computer to like look at a thread of emails and figure out who was at fault or like pull out all these salient details because human language is so complicated and everything. Like 5 years ago, I would have just thought, oh yeah, like I'm not even going to attempt to write that kind of program. It would just not work.
Well, yeah, even 2 years ago, like this is really sort of new stuff that we're kind of we're still figuring out the exact use cases that all the new tools. Generative AI, there's like no real, it's not an understatement to say that, in the last 2 years, it went from basically not working to working really, really well. So, and of course, it's still like it's not perfect, but I mean, that's the nature of machine learning. It's probabilistic. It's never going to be 100% perfect.
Yeah.
But it can definitely be useful.
Yeah, and that is why all the hoopla, all the hubbub about AI all of a sudden is because it's not just hype. There have been some major breakthroughs that you and I are using, like freeCodeCamp uses AI. Like everybody I know who's a software engineer is like learning how to work these into their workflows. It's a new tool in your toolbox that you can pull out for novel types of problems that before you just had to, use regex and pray essentially or something like that, right?
I feel like now is, I get a question quite often is like, should I even start now because of AI just like coming in and just changing everything? And I'm a big advocate of like now is, again, it sounds trite, but it's like now is like one of the best times ever to learn to code because the tools are so helpful.
Yeah.
And like there's a difference, like there's a kind of a niche difference between like coding and programming. Like I would say like programming to me is just thinking. Like a lot of my time, I think if people get the idea of like, if you're a software engineer, you just spend all day writing code. I would say now majority, like I do write a lot of code. However, I use AI tools such as GitHub Copilot to write a lot of the boilerplate, but for the stuff that I have to think out, that's mostly thought of. I've got a text document here where I've just been collecting ideas on a workflow that I'd like to be implementing, and I've been refining that workflow in my head, not writing any code yet, and then go, okay, that might work, and then I write the code to test the workflow. And all the boilerplate stuff is helped with AI tools. And what I mean by boilerplate, that's another term in the industry of like really tedious stuff that you kind of, you're not really thinking about when you write it, but it has to be there to get started. So it's like if you're writing an assignment, it's like the structure of the assignment. It like needs to be there to start, but it doesn't really take much thought, but it is tedious to get. And so AI tools now are very good at that. But for like specific workflows, that still requires programming, which is very thoughtful. Yeah. And a lot of the time is a lot of the code, actually, you'll write 1,000 lines of code, but then you'll delete 700 because you don't actually need them, and it's more efficient the way you're doing it. The first time is really rough. That's a really big thing in machine learning is you'll write like 1,000 different experiments, and maybe 10 of them work quite well, and you'll start to pursue those. Yeah. So a lot of my day is spent, writing code, but now AI tools write a lot of that baseline stuff for me. I still know I could, if I didn't have the AI tool, this is another important point, is that if I didn't have the AI tool, I'd still be able to write it. It would just take me longer, if that makes sense. So to the people who ask me, and this is what I reply with, is that it's actually a really great time to start learning to code, because the really big hurdle when you're starting is that you're learning a new language, and then it's like learning Chinese, learning Japanese, but then once you get over that big hurdle of the momentum of like just learning the syntax of like what goes where it goes, then you can start to, okay, you don't have to use such a big thought process just to get the syntax out. You can write the thing and keep going. And so AI tools are really, really good, like ChatGPT, Gemini. I mean, there's half a dozen of these chatbots now at writing fundamental Python code. And so if you have an error in Python, which is the language of machine learning, they're incredibly helpful for debugging it. and almost instantaneously. Whereas in the past, you'd have to really quite get good at searching and reading documentation and whatnot. That's not to say that's not still a valuable skill, but especially for that initial hurdle of learning something completely new, they're really, really good for that. And then once you've got some momentum, you can start to apply your skills. There's always going to be that sort of time where you can't necessarily use a chat assistant or whatnot, or an AI tool. Is that you're going to basically have to delve into the documentation of something that's new and hasn't been around for a while, and you need to just basically whack your head up against the wall and figure it out. Like, take some time.
Yeah, I mean, there aren't really any shortcuts. Like you said, like all the stuff you're talking about doing, you're still the problem solver. You're just using these tools as a way to solve the problem. But if you look at the code as like very succinct instructions for what to do, like, yes, the machine is very good at like figuring out, like, from its massive corpus, like Copilot has, I don't know, hundreds of thousands, millions of code examples from Python for implementing similar types of functions or something that it can draw from to create a similar type boilerplate. But at the end of the day, like, figuring out what work needs to be done and like the high level thinking, you still need human intellect to do that. And I don't think that's going to change dramatically anytime soon. Like, I always say this, like, you watch Star Trek and the computer doesn't just do everything. It doesn't just run the ship. Everything's done. Like, the humans don't do anything. No, the humans are doing lots of things. They're figuring out where to go. They're figuring out what is important. They're asking questions of the computer. They're creating new programs within the computer to get things done. And of course, that's just a science fiction show written in like the 60s, 70s, 90s. You know, but I think it's a pretty accurate assessment of like where technology is ultimately going. It's just yet stronger tools, yet longer levers for us to use to get more work done as empowered individuals. So yeah, I just want to quickly second what you just said, Daniel. I think it's more important than ever that people learn how to code, and people worry like, oh, but like, what if, you know, the jobs are taken by technology? Like, the people, the nutritionists who know how to use machine learning, the nutritionists who know how to get things done with computers are going to be much more competitive than the ones that just throw up their hands in despair and say, oh, I don't need to learn that stuff, or I'm not smart enough to learn that stuff, right? Same thing with teachers who learn technology. Same thing with, you know, doctors who learn how to use these technologies. Like, everybody in society can really benefit from layering this skill set on top of their domain expertise and on top of, you know, their profession, their trade. So, a couple just rapid fire questions, man. I just want to like make good use of your time. First of all, thanks again for waking up super duper early, right? What time is it over there?
It's 8:51 now, but it was, I know we had a couple of technical delays on my end, but it was, starting nice and early, 6 a.m., 6:30.
So Google Colab, you mentioned that. I just want to say, if you use the freeCodeCamp curriculum, we make heavy use of Google Colab for our machine learning section. Amazing tool. It's basically just an implementation of Jupyter Notebook, which is a popular open source Python.
Yes, that's
tool.
correct.
And then I've been taking detailed notes as you talk. One other thing that I think is kind of cool that you know, you've created this, like, I don't know, have you done it every year? But like the state of AI, like what you need to learn in 2022. You know, like you create these comprehensive learning paths. Have you created one for 2024 yet?
It's not every year, because I didn't want to. One, it took me a long time to do, but another one is like, it almost like, because it was changing so fast the last couple of years, I've held off on my most recent one. So I think I don't want to make promises, but there's like, I've definitely got a note of like research and whatnot of what I'd like to include in the next version. And I think this may be the 2024, 2025, and for the next couple of years and whatnot onwards. But yeah, it was sort of a resource that I'd like to have. So that was the 2020 machine learning roadmap, and that sort of stayed valid, like 95% valid up until about the launch of ChatGPT, and then it was like maybe 80% valid, because it and again, when I say valid, it doesn't mean that the material's invalid. It's that it's missing a few of the newer things that are available, if that makes sense. So the materials are still very valid for like the majority of the pre-generative AI sort of boom, but The next one will sort of definitely have a lot more information about generative AI tools. Because as I said, it was up until about 2 years ago that they essentially didn't work very well at all. And then it's like now they work really well. So well
like a
that
total breakthrough.
we use them. Yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah, well, I think it goes without saying that if you do want to create like a 2025 edition, I always like to joke that like you can release the 2025 edition in like September whenever they release like September 2024, the 2025 edition, because that's when they release the 2025 version of the cars, things like that.
Yeah.
If you decide to do that,
That's what I think. That's
we'd
my
be
timeline.
hyped.
Yeah.
We'd be like super duper hyped to post it or cross post it on freeCodeCamp's YouTube channel for the community, because like I enjoyed watching. I think I watched like 2 or 3 hours. It was a long video, and just like seeing you break down all the different fields and how all these disciplines interrelate. Because one thing you have is you don't have that academic pedigree of I've got a PhD in machine learning from XYZ, academy, but instead you're a nutritionist who taught himself all this stuff, and so you have that kind of like learning how to learn like in the trenches type mentality of like, okay, here's how I actually get things done. Here's how like the jobs that I've worked. The first job you ever got, by the way, you got to tell this story. You got your first developer job, but you didn't actually apply for it. Like, what happened exactly? How did how did you get your first developer job?
This is why I'm not good at answering the questions of like how to get a job. It was because when I got how do I get my first job? Because mine was kind of, and I just can only really speak to what I actually did. Was I was just, again, when I started studying machine learning and AI, I created my online pathway, and I was just posting on LinkedIn and my blog and Medium and YouTube of like different things that I was learning. And then someone must have found a post on LinkedIn, and I guess they knew someone else, and they knew that someone else was, again, this is 2018, so machine learning and AI wasn't as big as it is now. And so they talked to someone else, and then I got a message saying, hey, do you want to, I see you're into this machine learning and stuff. Do you want to catch up for coffee? And I'm like, yeah, sure. And then I went, caught up for coffee, and I kind of, again, imposter syndrome kicks in, because I'm like, oh, wow, do I actually have these skills, or am I just talking about them? And I spoke with this person, name's Mike, and he didn't actually know. He was learning from me. And so I was like, oh, wow, okay. I am actually learning some stuff. And then he's like, I know someone who I want you to meet, and I think like if your goal is to get a job in the field, they could probably help you out too. I'm like, okay, sweet. So met this person, Cam, 2 weeks later, let's say. And then I'm like, yeah, my goal is like I'm studying online, just in my bedroom. I'm driving Uber on the weekends, and I think I'm going to go to the US in a few months and just find a job. Like that was literally my plan. I was sort of, that's my sort of happy-go-lucky late nature of like, I'm just going to fly to the US and I'm going to make it work, right? And I kind of just had that irrational confidence of like, this is just going to work out. And again, that's not to say that there weren't moments of like, oh, am I doing the right thing? Am I actually going to make it? What all this sort of stuff. But nonetheless, I still just had this deep down confidence that it's like, no, if I just keep dedicating myself, something will happen. Lo and behold, he replies to that with, well, have you considered just staying in Australia? And I'm like, no, all this technology stuff is based in the US. And he's like, no, we've got a small company, like we're just starting to bring machine learning into Australia. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, yeah, do you want to come in next Monday? And I'm like, okay, sweet. And so I was the third machine learning engineer at this, machine learning engineer at that stage, at this technology company based in Brisbane. And we were a consultancy firm partnering with other big businesses in Australia because machine learning was just taking off with riding this hype cycle. And so we would go into big businesses like insurance companies, banks, medical centers, and figure out whether machine learning could be applied to their existing problems. And so that's where that sort of ties back into what I was saying before. If you're from other industries, the technology is so widespread now that you can kind of do some research. I'm not going to say you're going to have an epiphany straight away, but do some research and start to draw patterns between what you do day to day and what these technologies are capable of. Yeah. And so it was, again, luck. I kind of stumbled into it, but on one side of it, I was also publishing what I was doing quite vigorously online. Was it groundbreaking stuff? No, I was just sharing what I'd learned. And so it was almost like leveraging the power of the internet you never really know what's ever going to happen. So none of my stuff like went super viral or whatnot, but that's not, I've never banked on that. I was just like, I want to progress my skills and put that out there, because I knew no one, and I still know no one really. Well, I know a few people now actually in real life in my like hometown who was studying machine learning. So I'm like, I have to find people online. So that was sort of my mentality, and that's why I kept like posting things to sort of not necessarily like put my word out there, but also find other people who were interested in it.
Yeah, that's really cool. You have said in the past that if an employer on the notion of like shopping around for jobs and trying to find a good employer, you said if an employer doesn't think the building projects counts as experience, you probably don't want to work there. Can you tell me a little bit about how you decide like where you want to work and like what you look for in an employer?
Well, I've only ever had one machine learning job, and then I started to work for myself. So that's actually been my goal the whole time, is to start my own company.
Yeah.
So I was, I thought I wanted to work for a big tech company like Facebook or Meta or Google or something like that. But then I realized that once I learned more about the lifestyle, I was like, no, I want to sort of work for myself, have my own hours, have my own schedule, work on what I'm interested in. Kind of just a very like selfish point of view, but it was just that's just what I want. As long as I'm following my own curiosity and sharing that with the world, I figured like that's how I want to live, and I want to be able to spend time with my family, look after my dad, that sort of stuff. And I figured it would be really hard to do that if I was in the US and working a super big hour tech company job.
Yeah.
Sure, the compensation
like
would be
all-encompassing lifestyle, basically working for
That's
a big
what I
tech
mean,
company.
right?
Yeah.
Like the compensation, the salaries, everyone's heard of those, but I kind of learned that the economic sort of category wasn't as appealing to me as it once was, compared to other things.
Yeah.
And so obviously you need some baseline level of economic security. So I wasn't going to just do nothing and just sporadically follow interest without actually turning that into economic value. And so back to, I left that job, started working for myself, and what I'd learned there is how machine learning gets applied in many different industries, or at least how it attempts to be applied. And so what I was like, okay, I now have a balance of, I've learned machine learning myself, and now I've applied it in several different industries. I published an article online of like things I've learned in my first machine learning job, and that kind of went semi-viral, I guess, in the tech space on Medium. And then someone from Canada read it, Andre, who's my business partner now, who was teaching web development on Udemy and his own website. And he's like, we're looking for machine learning curriculum. All of our students are looking for machine learning. And I'm like, okay, I've never really taught a course online, but I have applied these skills and I have learned them. And so I started to create a course on machine learning of like all the things that I'd actually worked on, but I didn't quite learn online. So it's very practical, hands-on. So there's really no math in my courses. It's all just code, and like this is the code that you would write in day to day as a machine learning engineer. And so that turned out to be a way that I could make a living by teaching skills. I could also follow my curiosity by researching and then putting that into the courses. And then now, because of the flexibility that gives me of, I don't have necessarily scheduled hours to make resources. I just make them at will. I can now use time to build Nutrify, which is, and self-fund a startup with my brother that combines so it's kind of like a loop of like I learn new things to include in the courses, and I also there's a fly above my head. Learn new things to include in the courses, and then I use those things to build in a practical application, Nutrify, which anyone with an iPhone can download and use. And so then I integrate that back, the new stuff in the practical world, into updated materials.
It's a virtuous circle. It's like an engine that you built for yourself, where like you've got this kind of like feedback loop that benefits you.
That's it. But it's all sort of just stemmed from just having very real conversation with myself of how I'd like to live. And again, there's many different ways to. I had a physics teacher who had a funny saying. It was like, "There's many different ways to skin a cat," and I have no idea where that saying came from. But it just comes into my head every time I think about like someone's like, "What's the right path to learn, or what's the right path to live?" And I'm like, "There's so many different ways that it's just." And if you take advice from me, take advice from anyone else, it's all gonna just add to basically sum to zero. Because some people will be like. Who have the opposite point of view to me. It's like, well, you should go work at a big tech company and earn $300,000 a year for 5 years, and then after that do X, Y, Z.
Yeah, I mean that's reasonable advice too. By the way, like
that's 100%. That's what I'm saying.
But if you can do what you did, you skip that. You kind of leapfrogged over because you're able to self-fund by creating courses, by having a successful YouTube channel, and and you're able to apply your knowledge so that you can self-fund your startup, which. Self-funding your startup is 100 times better than having to like answer to investors all the time. And I say that as like, I've talked to so many people that prefer it. It depends on like you can't have a self-funded satellite company, but yeah.
Yeah, for some businesses, fortunately, our business is we don't have any expenses except for our time and database storage, which is quite cheap. But we've been rejected a few times from like things like this AI grant, and we've been rejected half a dozen. There was even
you applied for the AI grant program. Yeah, my friend applied for that. Everybody gets rejected. Like I think pretty much everybody I've had on the podcast has been rejected from Y Combinator, for example. Well,
that's what I mean. So that's what I mean. It's like it's a sort of the nature of the tech field in general is that it's literally just experimenting non-stop, and like most of those experiments won't work. And so whether it's like you're beginning to learn whatever it is, it's just like if you are curious about something, it's just like follow that curiosity, but just beware that basically the most of what you do won't necessarily work out. So, but then what you can do with that is apply what doesn't work. The quicker you figure out what doesn't work, the quicker you figure out what does. And so that's one of the reasons, like I have a saying in all my courses is experiment, 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 is because whether it's with learning how to learn, whether it's with communicating with customers or investors or something else like that, it's like it's just all one big experiment. And so the more experiments you run, the quicker you figure out what doesn't work, the quicker you figure out what does.
Yeah. Well, that is such a profound, simple thing. Like, just keep experimenting, keep iterating on your ideas. Don't build the chariot behind closed doors. Hopefully none of us are ever in a post-apocalyptic situation where it makes sense to skin a cat and eat it. I hope we never get in those dire straits.
Again, that's not one of those things from high school that I'm now remembering that's like, I don't condone, like...
Maybe he grew up during the Depression or something. I don't know.
I don't know. But it's just a saying. He would like do sine and cos mathematics in his head on the whiteboard, and then like write an algorithm and be like, because he's really smart, like he's a genius physicist, and then he'd write like several different things and be like, oh, we don't have to do that formula. We can do this one. 1,000 ways to skin a cat. And so now it's just like whenever I think of something with multiple paths, it's just ingrained in me of like, why would someone say that? But I don't know. It makes sense to me.
Well, it's a very literary expression, and I want to draw attention to, for those of you not watching the video who are listening to the podcast, which is how I listen. I don't actually watch the videos. I listen to the podcast. You can subscribe to the podcast distributed through the RSS feed, the open airwaves of this open protocol, real simple syndication. And you can listen in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. But if you're watching on YouTube, you will see behind Daniel quite a stocked bookshelf. You've got probably like, I don't know, 200 or 300 books on there.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
So you actually read physical books. You're like a technologist.
I love physical books.
Yeah. Talk about that.
That's my addiction. Physical books.
So you just like take a book to the beach, or where do you get most of your reading done?
Yeah, basically anywhere in the backyard. I have a little like just wooden table and chairs, and every morning I usually out there early morning and just look at my garden and read some pages. Coffee shops, basically anywhere in bed before going to sleep. Physical books. Like I'll often fall asleep holding a physical book. I just find it very soothing, very calming. Like in this again, like. My life is mostly built around screens, so I feel like a physical book is just it's not trying to sell you anything. You've already bought it. It's like one of the last places on earth where there's no ads. So
hopefully that remains the case. Yeah, and like
exactly right. And it's I just love it. There's something very satisfying about the tangibility of like flipping through pages and like. I guess, I don't know, completing a chapter or something like that. And then like just the smell, it's just very nostalgic to me. I can't really explain it, but it's like, I just know that I love it.
And one of the reasons I bring up books, I'm not just like doing this to comment on your beautiful bookshelf back there. You wrote a book and published it, a novel, if I recall correctly, about maybe a year and a half ago. Can you talk about that experience and what drove you to write fiction?
Yeah, well, so for those who aren't listening, this is my novel. It's on the
Charlie
screen.
Walks.
It's called Charlie Walks by Daniel Bourke. It's in the flesh, just to say that, like, to prove that Quincy's not making anything up. This is, by every word in this is by me. Some help from an editor, of course, to fix the typos and mistakes. But basically, I'm a copycat. If I see someone doing something that I find inspiring, I want to do that. And so some of my best mentors in life are authors. And I've never met anyone, I can't think of anyone, maybe in real life, maybe. I don't think I've met anyone who's written any of the books on the shelves in real life. I mean, a lot of them are passed on. But I read them and it's almost like, you have this connection and it's just like, that's inspiring to me. And so a lot of my heroes are authors. And so I'm like, well, I want to do that. And I kind of didn't read much at all in high school or even just outside of university because it was a lot of books that you quote unquote have to read. And that's kind of a theme with a lot of my learning is like, I forget anything that I had to learn. Whereas I remember everything that I wanted to learn. You remember
every page of the atlas, but nothing of, high school chemistry class or something like that, right?
Exactly.
Because you're forced to learn that. But when you're pursuing your own interests, it feels so fresh and interesting. And like you've discovered this and personal.
And I started reading, fiction novels. The first proper fiction novel, like obviously as a child, I think I read a little bit of Harry Potter with my parents and whatnot. But then the first fiction novel that really got me into like, wow, writing can be this, was Post Office by Charles Bukowski, which is
he worked in a post office for years. Like that was his full-time job, right?
That was his full-time job, was working excuse me. Charles Bukowski, for people who don't know, is a very prominent American-German author, but he, for the majority of his life, just worked deadbeat jobs, which is what he describes them as. And then he has a bunch of books that are basically just writing about this life and that he lived. And so Post Office was his first novel, and it's basically just a story of how he worked at a post office for 12 years and hated it. And a lot of people can read Bukowski's work and be sort of, I guess, find it sad or like he had this very grim look on life. But I kind of, and this is maybe my rose-colored glasses, I kind of looked at it and it was just like, you can make artwork out of the mundane. It was so inspiring to me. I was like, this is, I didn't want to put the book down. And I'd never really had that feeling with a book until, like, ever since I was a child, when I was reading a series of Unfortunate Events by Lemony Snicket. That's like another series that I read as a kid. There's that fly going around. And I read this book and I'm like, oh my gosh, you can just write a story about anything you want. And it's amazing. And so I'm like, I want to do that. And then that's where like I started writing, like about probably a year or two after I read Post Office, I started writing my own novel, and finished it basically through COVID, when it was lockdowns and all that sort of stuff. And wanted to go right to the end of not just writing behind closed doors, but similar to sort of how I like to publish a lot of what I work on, is I wanted to get it out in the world. I wanted to have my name basically amongst the other people on the shelves, and just be like, that was fun. I'm glad I did that. That was fun. If you had told me, it's another thing. It's like, you've told me when I was young that I would be writing my own book or fiction book, I would be like, no, that's stupid. But then again, things change over time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really cool that you pursued that dream of publishing a book and having your book on the shelf, a living author among many dead authors on your bookshelf back there. I'm going to put a link
one day,
check out Charlie
Walks.
Dead
author too.
Yeah, one day, but hopefully you got like another 80 years ahead of you, man. Who knows what kind of medical advancements are going to be brought about by generative AI.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And of course, I'm sure you're taking good care of your nutrition, that being your domain of expertise. So, Daniel, it's been such a blast having you on, man. It's been so great talking with you, learning more about you, because I feel like I couldn't find many good interviews. Ken's Nearest Neighbors podcast, that was the only podcast interview I could find with you. I'm like, man, this guy has so much to say. Let's put him in front of people. So, I feel
like I say enough on my YouTube channel and blog, so I'm like, I'm very glad you asked me an interview, because I do get requests, but I definitely do decline a fair few, because I kind of, I'm a little bit of a hermit, despite what it sounds like.
Yeah, man. Well, you're a very well-adjusted hermit. Well, thanks again. And hey, everybody who's listened this far, I just want to thank you for tuning in again. Be more like Daniel. Follow your curiosity, experiment, and check out the show notes for lots of insights and links from Daniel. And I hope you all have a fantastic, fun, productive week. Until next week, happy coding.